Welcome back, lovely ladies. If you want to become the woman of your dreams, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. And join our Patreon for even more exclusive content. Now, let's dive into today's story.
The weekend was approaching fast. I was exhausted from long hours at my office job, and my brother, who lived in another city, had offered to join me for a short trip. We rarely spent time together without the rest of the family, so I jumped at the chance to reconnect. I'm 27 and he's 24. Work and life had carved out separate paths for us, but we still cared about each other. We decided on a 2-day getaway in a city neither of us had explored much. It seemed like a good plan. 2 nights in a decent hotel, a chance to unwind and catch up over good food. I checked into the hotel a few hours before my brother arrived. As I entered the lobby, I was reminded of how much I had missed spending time with him. Though we called and texted, we hadn't actually traveled together in years. On the way to the front desk, I made small talk with the concierge, feeling a little thrill at the prospect of sharing a room with my brother, like we did when we were kids. Back then, we would stay up all night telling jokes or reading comic books with flashlights under the covers. Now we were both adults, and life had steered us in unexpected directions. Once I had the room key, I rode the elevator up to our floor. The space was cozy. A large window overlooked the city's main street with its bright neon signs and constant stream of pedestrians. There were 2 full-sized beds, a nightstand between them, and a small desk in the corner. A big mirror stretched across the dresser. The place was clean, smelled faintly of fresh linen, and had all the usual hotel amenities: a television, a small coffee maker, and an iron that looked like it had been used 1,000 times. I set my bag on my bed. Inside was my usual weekend gear: enough clothes for 2 days, my toiletry kit, a couple of reading materials, and something else I had started packing on trips: a dress I had bought a few months earlier. It was knee-length, with a subtle floral pattern. I had grown attached to wearing items like this in my private time, though it wasn't something I'd shared with anyone in my family or circle of friends. The idea of wearing the dress in front of another person felt daunting. But there was a small part of me that couldn't resist bringing it wherever I went. It gave me a sense of confidence I couldn't quite explain. My brother arrived later that evening. He knocked on the door, and I greeted him with a smile. He was taller than me by a couple of inches, with the same brown hair and a grin that somehow felt both mischievous and reassuring. "Wow," he said, tossing his bag onto the other bed. "You got here early. How's the room?" "Great," I replied. "There's a decent view of the street. We can watch people come and go if we get bored." He leaned toward the window, taking in the city lights. "I'm starving. How about we grab dinner soon?" "Sounds perfect." We left almost immediately. We found a nearby restaurant serving big burgers and fries. Over the meal, we chatted about our days in high school, old friends, and how weird it felt to be actual adults traveling together. It was such a simple conversation, but it made me realize how much I'd missed him. Later, we returned to the hotel. My brother had other plans for the night. He was meeting a friend from college who happened to be in town, so he told me he might be back late. I nodded and mentioned I'd probably hang back in the room to watch a movie or read. He left within minutes, and I found myself alone. A small wave of nerves washed over me because I had packed the dress. I had never worn it where someone might return unexpectedly. But after flipping through a few TV channels and finding nothing interesting, I felt that subtle pull. Part of me was excited at the idea of wearing it, even briefly. It was like I had discovered an outfit that made me feel at ease in some indescribable way. I wanted just a few minutes to enjoy that feeling. I reasoned my brother wouldn't be back for at least an hour or 2. I took the dress out of my bag carefully, unfolding it and smoothing out the wrinkles. My heart pounded. The possibility of him walking in unannounced made my stomach tense, but I told myself to relax. After all, I'd have time to change back if I heard him in the hall. I went into the small bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I could see subtle signs of stress in my expression, shadows under my eyes, a slight crease on my forehead. I closed the bathroom door behind me, set the dress on the countertop, and began to change. First, I removed my shirt and pants, folding them neatly. With shaky hands, I slipped the dress on. The cool fabric brushed against my skin as I carefully brought it over my shoulders. I adjusted the waist, making sure everything was sitting correctly. It felt right somehow. I usually kept a small handheld mirror to check the back, but the bathroom had a mirror that stretched across the entire sink. As I zipped the side halfway, I heard something in the bedroom. My heart dropped. The door clicked. A flash of panic went through me, and I realized my brother had come back early. I tried to yank the zipper down, but it got stuck. My hands shook. I could have locked the bathroom door, but the doorknob on the bathroom had a habit of sticking, and I wasn't sure I'd have time to explain why I was locking it. That alone would create suspicion. So I stood there, half-zipped, while the sense of fear ballooned in my chest. "Hey," my brother called from the room. "I forgot my wallet. Must have left it on the bed." I said nothing at first, still fumbling with the zipper, but I wasn't quick enough. He was already pushing the bathroom door open to ask if I'd seen his wallet. We made eye contact in the mirror. I froze. He took in the sight of me in that floral dress, arms raised to my side, clearly trying to zip it up or down. The tension felt like it lasted forever, but in reality, it was probably only a second or two. Finally, he spoke. "Sorry, didn't mean to barge in," he said. I could tell he was surprised, but he didn't look revolted or anything. In fact, he just stared for a moment, then added, "Cool dress, man." I could only stand there, face flushed. I had spent years wondering how family or friends might react if they ever discovered this side of me, and the moment was unfolding in a way I hadn't anticipated. Thanks," I managed to say in a shaky voice, still trying to unstick the zipper. I didn't think you'd be back so soon." He opened his mouth as if to say something, but closed it. Then, with a small nod, he stepped back. "My wallet." "Right," he said, exiting the bathroom to search. I found the sense to finally get the zipper down. My hands were trembling, and my heart was beating so loudly I thought it might thump right out of my chest. There was no hiding what he had seen, no easy way to pretend it was a misunderstanding. He'd clearly caught me wearing a dress. After he found his wallet, he called through the bathroom door. "I'll be heading out again. We can talk later if you want." I managed a small, "Okay." He left. I listened for the sound of the hotel room door closing behind him. Then I removed the dress with shaking hands and folded it away as quickly as possible, slipping back into my typical jeans and shirt. I felt lightheaded, unsure of what might happen next. Part of me expected condemnation or endless teasing. Another part was worried that our relationship might shift in a painful direction. Feeling restless, I paced around the room, eventually flopped onto my bed, then turned on the television again to try to distract myself. My mind kept replaying the moment of being caught. I realized I had no idea how my brother truly felt about it. I replayed his words. He hadn't mocked me or looked disgusted. Instead, he had spoken in a neutral tone that was as disorienting as it was mildly reassuring. He didn't come back for several hours. I stayed up, reading online articles, scrolling through my phone. My thoughts kept drifting, and I couldn't concentrate on anything. Finally, around midnight, the electronic beep of the door lock alerted me that he was back. I sat upright on the bed, remote control in hand. He walked in quietly. He placed his wallet on the nightstand and let out a sigh. "Hey," he said, almost in a whisper. "You still awake?" "Yeah," I replied, swallowing. "Couldn't sleep." He nodded and set his phone aside. We sat in tense silence for a moment as he hovered near his bed. I could see the debate in his eyes, like he was trying to figure out the right words. Then he cleared his throat. "So, about earlier." I shifted nervously. You saw me, right?" He nodded. "I did." We both paused. I could feel the tension draining from my limbs, replaced by a strange urge to just get it out, talk about it, end the uncertainty. "Look," I began, "I know it's probably weird to see your brother wearing something like that. I never told anyone about it. I don't know. It feels good for me to wear these clothes sometimes. I know it might not make sense." He sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on his knees. He stared at me in a measured way, not judging, just trying to gather information. "I don't think it's weird," he said softly. "I just never knew this was part of your life. How long have you been doing it?" I pressed my lips together, thinking how to explain. "A while. I was curious in my teens, but I was scared. After college, I tried on something I liked, at first as a kind of experiment. Then I realized it felt comfortable, and since then I've occasionally bought a few items. I mostly keep it private." He let out a slow breath. "You must have felt pretty anxious when I walked in." I nodded. "That's putting it mildly. It's something I've never shared, and I had no idea how you'd react." He offered a reassuring glance. I was surprised. "Sure, but I'm not upset or anything. If it makes you feel good, then it's not harming anyone." A wave of relief washed over me. Still, I wanted to make sure this wasn't just him being polite. "So, you really don't think it's, I don't know, disgusting or something?" He shook his head. "No, definitely not. I'm not the type to judge you for wearing whatever you want." He paused. "I guess I'm more curious than anything. I have questions. Like, is it just a preference for certain clothes? Or is it something else? Do you want to change anything about yourself?" I took a moment to consider. He was asking things I'd asked myself many times, questions that didn't always have clear answers. "I'm not sure. I know I enjoy wearing these clothes, but there's not much beyond that right now. I don't have a life plan for it. I just know I feel more at ease sometimes if I can be free to wear what I like in private." He seemed to accept that and gave a slow nod. "Thanks for telling me," he said. "Or, well, thanks for talking about it now that I've seen it firsthand. I think it's really brave, honestly." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The television in the background displayed a late-night sitcom, the laugh track slightly muffled. The emotional tension was still there, but it felt strangely lighter, as though we'd taken a step forward in understanding each other. Eventually, he yawned and checked his phone. "We should probably get some sleep. We can talk more tomorrow if you want." "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." We turned off the TV lights and lay in the respective beds, the quiet hum of the air conditioner filling the space. My heart still beat quickly, but I felt a tremendous sense of relief. For the first time, I told a family member about my interest in wearing dresses, and not only had the world not collapsed, but he'd actually seemed supportive, or at least open to hearing more. I woke up early, as I often do. My brother was still asleep. I quietly made some in-room coffee and stared out the window at the early morning traffic. Cars wove down the streets, pedestrians hurried to their workplaces, and the city was already alive. I replayed our conversation from the night before. It was surreal, but also strangely encouraging. Eventually, my brother groaned and rolled over. "Morning," he said, voice thick with sleep. "Morning," I replied. "Coffee's in the pot if you want some." He hauled himself out of bed, poured poured a small cup and joined me by the window. He looked tired but calm. We stayed like that for a while, sipping coffee in comfortable silence, the city's energy right below us. Finally, he spoke. "So, are you cool if I ask more questions?" "Sure," I answered, turning to face him. "Go ahead." He thought for a moment. "When did you first realize you liked wearing dresses? You said it was back in your teens?" I nodded, resting my coffee mug on the window ledge. "Kind of. In my teens, I would see clothes that I thought were beautiful, but I didn't let myself consider wearing them. I was too afraid. After college, I found a local store having a sale. I was drawn to a simple black dress, almost on impulse. I had to muster a lot of courage, but I ended up buying it. Once I wore it in private, it felt good. Over time, I picked up a few more outfits. I never told anyone about it, just kept it to myself." He nodded. "I get that. I guess it's not something you'd bring up at family dinner." I let out a short laugh. "Yeah, I didn't think that would go over well. But to be honest, you're the first person in the family I've ever told." My brother looked thoughtful. "Thanks for trusting me. And I hope you know I won't say anything to anyone. It's your call if or when you want to share that with anyone else." "I appreciate that," I said. "I'm not ready for more people to know. Honestly, I never expected you to find out." He nodded once more. "Hey, I might have teased you a bit when we were kids, but I'd never want to make you feel bad about something important in your life." This small declaration was more comforting than I would have imagined. Looking at him, I felt a sense of gratitude and warmth. Part of me wanted to hug him, but we weren't usually that demonstrative. I just smiled and said, "It means a lot." We soon got ready for the day, changing into our usual casual clothes, then headed out to explore the city. We wandered through side streets, checked out a small art gallery, and had a late breakfast at a diner that was packed with weekend travelers like us. Whenever the conversation drifted back to the dress, it felt oddly natural, as though the discovery had opened a new, more honest channel between us. My brother asked questions, some almost childlike in their directness, but never offensive. He'd say things like, "Does wearing a dress feel different physically? Or is it more of an emotional thing? Or, do you ever feel like wearing it in public?" I answered the best I could, explaining that sometimes it was about the style and softness of the fabrics. Other times it was about a sense of freedom from expectations. And no, I didn't generally wear it in public because I wasn't sure how people would react. At one point, we stopped in front of a vintage clothing store. The window display showed retro jackets and dresses from decades past. My brother glanced at me, raising an eyebrow. "Want to check it out?" A flutter of nerves ran through me, but also a spark of excitement. "Sure," I said. "Why not?" Inside, racks were crowded with colorful garments. My brother wandered the aisles, looking at old band t-shirts and leather jackets. I made my way through rows of dresses from different eras. Some had floral prints, others were made with heavier fabrics and bright patterns. I touched the sleeves and felt the materials, a mix of curiosity and caution swirling inside me. There were a few other customers in the store, but nobody paid attention to us. My brother eventually joined me near the women's section, glancing over some items. "Any of these catch your eye?" he asked casually, as if it was the most natural conversation in the world. My cheeks warmed. "I like the look of this one," I admitted, brushing my fingertips across a blue dress with a subtle striped pattern. It had short sleeves and a gentle A-line skirt. He studied it. "That's cool," he said, nodding. Then, with a playful grin, he added, "What size are you anyway?" I snorted a laugh. "I usually aim for a medium, but I have to check the measurements. Women's sizing can be all over the place." He laughed too. "No kidding. I've heard complaints about that." Feeling bold, I slipped the dress off the rack to check the price tag. It was within reason. My brother was watching me with an encouraging look, and a small part of me wanted to try it on right there. But the dressing rooms were visible to everyone in the store, and I wasn't quite ready for that. I settled for holding it up to my torso as a quick guess. We spent another few minutes browsing. Eventually, I returned the dress to the rack, deciding I wasn't in the mood to make a public display by trying it on. My brother didn't push me, just nodded understandingly. We left soon after, and neither of us felt awkward or uncomfortable. Instead, we felt like two siblings who had learned how to discuss something new without fear. That afternoon, we explored more of the city, stopped at a bookstore, ate some snacks, and chatted with a street vendor selling handmade crafts. It was one of the more relaxed days I'd had in a while. I realized how little I'd truly opened up to my brother in recent years. Perhaps we had assumed we knew everything there was to know about each other from childhood, never considering that we might both be evolving in different, unexpected ways. Evening arrived, and we decided to return to the hotel for a quick rest before dinner. Once inside the room, my brother asked, "Do you feel like wearing the dress tonight, or do you want to keep it in your bag?" His question was gentle and genuinely curious. My heart skipped a beat, partly from nerves and partly from gratitude that he was offering me a chance to be comfortable with myself while we were just hanging out. I mulled it over. "Maybe after dinner," I said. "I'm still feeling self-conscious, to be honest." He nodded. "That's fine. I won't bring it up if you don't want to." We went out to dinner at a nearby Italian restaurant that had warm lighting, soft music, and a small corner table perfect for conversation. My brother asked about my job, my goals, and whether I had any close friends who knew about my taste in clothes. I told him that nobody knew, because I'd never felt ready to share it. I added that I had occasionally considered telling a close friend, but something always held me back. He listened thoughtfully, swirling pasta around his fork. "I understand," he said. "But if you ever need support, I'm here, whether it's about clothes or anything else." My eyes stung with unexpected emotion. I sipped my water, thankful for the ambient noise of the restaurant to give me a moment to compose myself. "I really appreciate it," I said finally. We finished our meal and walked back to the hotel under the glow of street lamps. The sidewalks were lively with couples going to bars, college students laughing in groups, and tourists snapping photos. Something about the city's atmosphere felt welcoming, as if it were embracing all kinds of people. I felt a calm sensation that was new to me. I had spent so long feeling anxious about family discovering this side of me, and now that my brother knew, I felt lighter. There was still uncertainty, but not nearly as much. Back in the room, he flopped down on his bed and checked his phone. I went to the bathroom to wash my face. My reflection in the mirror looked almost unrecognizable from the morning before. My posture seemed straighter, my eyes less worried. I wondered if my brother had noticed these changes too. Probably. He was observant when it came to people's moods. When I came out, he was scrolling through streaming options on the TV. "Feel like watching a movie?" he asked. "Sure," I answered, settling on my own bed. "What did you have in mind?" He shrugged. "Something light, maybe a comedy." We picked something that fit the bill. As the opening credits rolled, I found myself fidgeting, glancing at my bag, thinking about the dress folded neatly at the bottom. I turned to my brother. "Hey," I said softly. "I think I might put it on now, if that's okay." He nodded without hesitation. "Go for it. I'll pause this until you're settled." I got up, grabbed my bag, and stepped into the bathroom. My hands were still a bit shaky, but a tingle of anticipation flickered in my chest. I changed into the dress, smoothing out the fabric over my body. I glanced in the mirror, taking in the sight of myself. My brother was going to see me again, but this time I was inviting him to do so instead of being caught off guard. When I emerged from the bathroom, he glanced over and gave me a smile. "It looks good on you," he said, nodding with approval. I stood there, feeling equal parts awkward and proud. I wasn't used to compliments regarding this side of myself. "Thanks," I managed, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I moved to my bed and sat down, the dress flowing neatly around my knees. It felt surreal, but in a warm and comforting way. He resumed the movie. We sat side by side, occasionally laughing at the scenes. At one point, I got up to grab some water. He didn't even look twice. If anything, he treated it like the most normal thing in the world. And it was in that moment I realized that all the shame, fear, and tension I'd associated with wearing a dress around family was not present in the room anymore. Instead, there was an unspoken sense of understanding between us. Later, during a lull in the movie, he muted the TV and turned to me. "You know, I never would have guessed you liked dressing like this, but seeing you now, it just feels like you're being yourself. I don't mean that in a cliché way," he quickly added, "but it really does look like you're comfortable." I swallowed a surge of emotion. "I do feel comfortable," I admitted. "More than I ever thought I could around another person, especially family." He smiled. We didn't linger on it too long, letting the movie's comedic scenes pull us back into laughter. By the time the credits rolled, we were yawning, and the hour was late. Before we turned in, my brother asked, "You gonna sleep in that?" A small laugh escaped me. "No, it's not exactly comfortable for sleeping. I'll change back to my t-shirt and sweatpants." He nodded, blinking heavily. "Got it. I'm about to pass out any second." I gathered my usual sleep clothes and returned to the bathroom. Once the dress was folded neatly, I pulled on my pajamas. Emerging again, I saw my brother was already under the covers. I flicked off the main light, and soon the only illumination came from the lamp between our beds. Sliding under my own sheets, I felt an odd sense of serenity. "Night," he mumbled, turning his back to the lamp. "Night," I replied, switching off the final light. The next morning was the last day of our trip. We had to check out before noon, so we woke up early, showered, and packed our things. The mood was lighter, with easy banter about where to have breakfast and what time we'd start the drive back. As I was zipping my bag, I realized the dress was packed in the same place as always, but the emotions surrounding it had changed completely from when we first arrived. I was no longer terrified he would discover it. He already had, and he didn't mind. In fact, he'd been more supportive than I could have dared to imagine. When we were ready to leave, we took the elevator down to the lobby. As we checked out, my brother struck up a friendly conversation with the staff about local coffee shops. I stood by, nodding along, reflecting on how much had changed in just 2 days. We decided to grab a final meal together before heading our separate ways. The drive to a nearby breakfast joint was filled with talk about our parents and how they might or might not react if they found out about my interest in wearing dresses. I wasn't sure I was ready for that, and my brother agreed there was no rush. Over pancakes and scrambled eggs, we joked about our childhood misadventures. Occasionally, we circled back to the events of the weekend. "You seem more relaxed," he commented at one point, slicing into his pancakes. "Like a giant weight has been lifted." I nodded, poking at my eggs with a fork. "I do feel a lot more at peace right now," I admitted. I avoided certain words that might sound too sentimental, but the feeling inside me was potent. For the first time, I'd told a family member about this part of my life, and it hadn't shattered our relationship. In fact, it seemed to have pulled us closer. Once we finished, we walked outside, the morning sun bright. We stood by my brother's car, which was parked next to mine in a nearly empty lot. He stuffed his hands in his pockets, leaning against the door. "Thanks for inviting me on this trip," he said quietly. I know it wasn't planned for me to walk in on you like that, but I'm glad I know. I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. I never thought I'd be glad about being caught wearing a dress, I admitted, but I guess this turned out better than I ever hoped. He gave a soft laugh. It did. I have your back, okay? We stood for a moment in silence. Then I clapped him on the shoulder in that casual, brotherly way. All right, I'll see you soon. We shouldn't wait another year or two before we hang out again. He agreed, and we parted ways. I watched him drive off and felt a swirl of gratitude. The entire weekend had been unexpected, but also transformative in a way I hadn't realized I needed. On the drive back, I replayed conversations from the last few days. A few times I caught myself smiling in traffic. My brother's willingness to engage, to be curious instead of condemning, had shifted something in me. I understood him more deeply too. His calm acceptance of who I was showed his maturity. We weren't kids anymore, teasing each other over silly things. We were adults who could support each other in complicated matters. When I finally got home, I took my bag to my room and carefully hung the dress in my closet instead of burying it at the bottom of a suitcase. That small action felt symbolic. Even though I didn't plan to broadcast my love of dresses to everyone in my life, I realized I no longer felt compelled to hide it the same way. A few days later, my phone lit up with a message from him. He sent me a link to an article about a fashion exhibit featuring unconventional styles, along with a simple text. Might be your jam. Let's go together next time I'm in town. I read it, my heart swelling with a sense of reassurance. I texted back an enthusiastic, definitely. We kept texting throughout the week. Our conversations covered everything from random memes to more serious topics, but there was an undercurrent of honesty that hadn't been there before. We talked about the next time we'd see each other, maybe another weekend road trip, or maybe he'd just crash on my couch. I promised I'd show him around my neighborhood if he came for a visit. A week after our trip, I found myself holding the dress again on a quiet evening. I slipped it on and stared in the mirror, thinking about how differently I felt compared to when I used to keep this entirely to myself. I used to look at my reflection with concern, wondering if I was doing something wrong, or if people would mock me. Now I saw someone who wasn't burdened by that worry. My brother's response had given me a layer of peace that I was still processing. He called me that same night, just wanting to talk about mundane things, his latest workout routine, how he was thinking of changing jobs. We chatted easily, and before hanging up he said, "Hey, thanks for trusting me. Seriously." I laughed lightly. "You already said that." "I know," he replied. "Just wanted to remind you." We ended the call. I sat there in my bedroom, wearing that floral dress, feeling the lingering warmth of our conversation. Never in my wildest imagination would I have pictured myself on the phone with my brother, wearing a dress, thinking about how supportive he'd been. But that was our reality now, and it was better than anything I'd feared. Over the next month, our closeness grew. We swapped stories about our everyday lives, but there was an extra spark in our relationship. He texted me to check in, to ask if I'd found any new clothing items I liked, and to share jokes about random things. I reciprocated, asking about his life, reminding him that if he ever needed help or advice, I'd be there. Something about his care made me realize that we were forging a bond that went beyond just being siblings by birth. We were forging a bond of genuine trust. Sometimes I'd let my mind wander to the possibility of telling other family members. I wasn't ready yet, but I felt more confident that if or when that day came, I wouldn't face it alone. My brother had already proven that I didn't have to tackle this part of my life in isolation. Not everything was perfect, of course. There were times when I still hesitated, questioning how other people might react if they ever found out. I still had a sense of caution whenever I wore dresses in private, but I took comfort in knowing that at least one person in my family was aware of this side of me and didn't think any less of me. That solidarity made the uncertainty of the future a bit easier to bear. A few months later, my brother visited my apartment for a weekend. It was the first time we'd spent extended time together since that moment in the hotel bathroom. We had dinner plans with some of his friends, but while we were hanging out in my living room, he casually asked, "Hey, do you mind if I see that dress again? The one I caught you wearing?" I almost laughed at how casually he said it. "Sure, it's in my closet. Why?" He shrugged. "I was just thinking about how it looked on you, and I was curious if you still wore it." I retrieved the dress. He gave it a thoughtful once-over, holding it out to look at the floral pattern. "It's nice," he said, nodding in approval. I remember I said that the first time, but I was in such a rush then. Now I can really appreciate it. I smiled, touched by his interest. "I still like wearing it. A lot, actually." He handed it back to me. "You ever think about showing it to someone else you trust, like a close friend?" I let out a breath, considering. "Maybe eventually. I'm not sure yet. That's a big step." He put a hand on my shoulder. "Well, whenever you do decide, or if you decide, you've always got me in your corner." It was remarkable how such a simple gesture held so much meaning. I gave him a grateful nod, then hung the dress back up. After that, we chatted about random things, sports, music, what we were going to cook for dinner. The topic of the dress stayed in the background, present but not overwhelming. Later that night, after the two of us ate dinner at home, he headed out to meet some college friends, leaving me with the same alone time as before. But this time, there was no anxiety about him walking in unexpectedly. If he came back, I wouldn't scramble to hide who I was. And that feeling of calm acceptance in the space we shared was something I never thought I'd experience. When he returned, we ended up talking late into the night about our childhood memories, summer vacations, pranks we'd pulled on each other, how we used to have secret signals during family gatherings. In one moment of nostalgic laughter, he patted my shoulder again. "I like this version of us. Feels honest," he said, pausing as if to check my reaction. I responded with a nod and a half smile. "Yeah," I said. "I do too." Eventually, he went to crash in the guest room, and I returned to mine. Before heading to bed, I briefly considered slipping on my dress again, but I realized it didn't matter if I wore it or not at that moment. I felt at home in my own skin either way, and that was a new sensation for me. In the morning, we shared one last cup of coffee before he left. As he was stepping out the door, he turned around and said, "By the way, I'm happy you felt comfortable enough to bring the dress on that trip. I know you didn't expect me to see it, but I'm glad I did. It brought us closer." "Me too," I replied with warmth. "Safe drive." He gave me one more smile and left. The door closed, and with it came the realization that the conversation we'd shared months ago in that hotel room had fundamentally changed something important between us. We had built a new kind of bond, one rooted in respect and empathy. Looking back on that hotel weekend, I still recall the fear that shot through me when he walked into the bathroom. But that intense moment, frightening as it was at first, proved to be a turning point. Rather than the horror story I'd always imagined in my head, it became a story of two brothers rediscovering each other in a new light. And with that, the dress remained a symbol of how hearts could open wider than I'd ever expected. Even if I never wore it anywhere besides my bedroom, the knowledge that I didn't have to hide it from him was enough to make me feel a sense of relief. It was a quiet, reassuring sign that my own brother valued me for who I was, no matter what clothes I chose to wear. Our lives continued on separate tracks, each of us busy with work and personal goals. But now, There was a thread tying us together more tightly than before. We didn't always talk about the dress. Usually our conversations revolved around the mundane details of life. Yet the memory of the moment he saw me, the calm reaction in his eyes, the curiosity in his questions, and the willingness to embrace something he didn't fully understand, that memory stuck with me, pushing me to worry less about what others might think. I wasn't sure what the future held for me, or whether I would broaden this part of my life in front of more people. But for now, knowing that my brother saw me as the same person, someone he loved, was all the reassurance I needed. I never expected one short trip and a shared hotel room to lead to a profound conversation, but I was grateful for it. The day he left my apartment, I stood at my window again, sipping coffee, wearing jeans and a casual shirt, and I couldn't stop replaying his simple, supportive words. In our last phone call about the topic, he said he was proud of me. That meant more than I could express. While our relationship had always been good, something about that weekend in the hotel made us open up even more. He once told me that he learned a lot about what it meant to care for someone by asking honest questions and giving space for them to answer. I told him that's exactly what he did for me. He said he was just doing what any decent sibling would do. But the truth is, not everyone can meet that moment with such understanding. I also recognized a new sense of pride in myself for stepping forward, accidentally at first, but eventually willingly. Though it was not planned, I finally admitted this part of myself to someone, and the reality was far kinder than the scenarios my imagination had cooked up over the years. Sometimes I find myself recalling those final moments in the hotel room, when we watched that comedy movie with me in the dress, neither of us making a fuss about it. That was the moment it truly sank in that I no longer had to shoulder everything alone. Even now I keep that dress in my closet, no longer hidden away at the bottom of a suitcase. Occasionally I'll wear it in my apartment, sometimes while talking to him on a video call, though I don't always point it out. He'll joke about silly things, ask me for relationship advice, or talk about family gatherings we might attend. And I'll keep that sense of calm, that sense that I'm free to express myself without losing his respect. The weekend trip itself was just 2 days, yet those days contained a pivotal moment I would never forget. I discovered that my brother's reaction wasn't what I had feared. Instead of mocking me, he gave me a shrug and an easy comment that was so ordinary it made me laugh later for having feared the worst. Then the stream of questions showed his genuine interest, and it opened a conversation that ran deeper than either of us expected. When I think of the single word that best describes how we parted ways, it is closeness. No longer were we simply brothers bound by family ties. We were two adults with a deeper trust and a genuine sense of warmth between us. For so long, I had been carrying a secret, unsure how anyone in the family might react if they stumbled upon it. To my surprise, the one who discovered it, quite by accident, chose to embrace it without letting it divide us. And that, more than anything, is what still resonates in my mind whenever I see the floral pattern of that dress or remember the feeling of the hotel's scratchy carpet under my feet. It marked a moment when fear gave way to understanding. It became a turning point in my relationship with my brother, allowing us to grow together instead of apart. The best part of it all is that the bond hasn't faded. We stayed connected, sharing more of our individual quirks, supporting each other through obstacles, and never shying away from difficult subjects. Because once you show someone a part of yourself that you've spent years hiding, it's hard to pretend on a surface level anymore. You realize how liberating honesty can be and how it can strengthen a relationship rather than break it. So, in the end, it was only 2 nights in a shared hotel room, but for us, it ended up being more significant than any trip we'd taken in the past. We started that weekend as siblings who hadn't talked much about the deeper elements of our lives. We left it with a renewed sense of unity, a willingness to ask uncomfortable questions, and the realization that genuine care and loyalty can melt away even the thickest layers of nervousness. I'll always keep that moment in my heart, standing there, dress half-zipped, panicking because he'd walked in unexpectedly, only to find him shrugging and saying, "Cool dress, man." That moment said more than any elaborate speech ever could. It reminded me that sometimes we don't have to live in constant fear. Sometimes the people we love surprise us with their capacity to support us. And for me, that moment, though it began with dread, turned into a memory that I will cherish as long as I live.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.